This show is brought to you by SalCal Real Estate Connections.
Welcome to the Telescope View. I'm Larry Mangello, and I'd like to introduce to you co-host Steve Parker and co-host Rick Teles. We're here today to cover a show about UFO activity and ET activity throughout time, from BC all the way up to present and the future. And believe me, we are going to get into some real interesting subjects. And believe me, we talk about xenoarchaeology, which don't even ask me what that means, but I'm sure, Rick,
xenoarchaeology.
You are going to let us know.
We'll talk about it.
And we also are going to talk and debunk things like if it can't be and therefore it isn't. These are strange things that the media has given us and officials to not debunk what the real meaning of UFOs and ETs mean. We've gotten into a lot of different subjects as far as myth and religion, which we're going to cover through the show. There's going to be times where you may not think what we're saying is correct, and we understand that. We're going to leave it up to you to come up with what you really think the truth is. And Steve, could you let us know what is your background?
Well, it started with my uncle. No, I'm only kidding. I actually grew up in the world of airwaves. I grew up in radio and television, and I've done multiple shows on TV and radio. And the thing that really turned me on to UFOs was one night when my dad and I were driving out. We saw these lights rolling around in the sky like that, and we both saw it. So we both agreed that it was something. So we followed from Newington into Hartford, right over by Bushnell Park, and it was really lit up around a lot more there. And as we got closer and closer and looked up at those lights going around and around, we looked really close and it said Goodyear on the side, which just goes to show all UFOs, that doesn't mean flying saucers. It's an unidentified flying object, and we didn't identify it until we got into Bushnell Park. And that's why I have those tires on my car today. There you go.
And that's why we call you our favorite Martian. Okay, now we're going to let you have the word with Rick Teles, who is really our expert when it comes to this kind of activity.
You know, I don't know how much I like the expert tag, but my professional background includes master's degrees in computer science and education. And I've worked on everything from computer operating systems design to artificial intelligence. But my specialty really was cybersecurity, where I worked on special projects for the U.S. government and the aerospace industry. And it was in that work, those special programs, where I met 5 men in the military and intelligence communities who were willing to share with me their experience regarding the UFO phenomenon and the questions about extraterrestrial life. Does it exist? And how much does the U.S. government know about this? And a little spoiler is, yes, they do exist, and yes, the U.S. government does know about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. As far as UFOs are concerned, I've been a UFO researcher for almost 50 years, and I've worked on hundreds of investigations of all types, including the infamous abductions. And I've worked with just about all the UFO organizations, including MUFON, NICAP, APRO, a lot of initials or acronyms that nobody knows, the Center for UFO Studies, National UFO Reporting Center, as well as performing forensic examinations of older UFO sightings. So we try to understand in current technology what they might mean to us. So that's kind of my background, and we're going to be talking about some of that. I think when we talk about this show, as you mentioned, we're going to be talking about a lot of different subjects. And the one point I want to make, and Larry and Steve and I talk about this a lot, is some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, you've heard before. You've heard about Roswell. You heard the ancient astronaut theory. Many people hear that as ancient astronauts. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the sightings that you heard. And what we're going to do, like Larry said, is you're going to like some of what we have to say, and you're not going to like some other stuff, because I'm going to tell you what was real and what wasn't, as far as what we know from the U.S. government based on classified reports. And what we want to do here, why we're going to be different, is we want to redefine your perspective in terms of this topic, UFOs and extraterrestrial life. We want to redefine reality, if you will. And I don't want to get all philosophical on you. That's not my point. The point is that reality for us is based on science. It has been for many hundreds of years. okay? And what can't be defined by our science surely must be myth, religion, or conspiracy theory. So we're going to talk about how reality has changed a bit, and how sometimes our science can't define what is reality, and how that relates to the UFO and the extraterrestrial, the fact that UFOs and extraterrestrial might actually exist.
Now, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Absolutely. The truth of the matter is what we know today, as opposed to what happened in the past, is changing the picture of all this. Am I right or wrong, Rick?
Well, you are, and we're talking about 21st century thinking, 21st technology versus 16th century technology or 15th century technology. I like to tell the little tiger story. My grandson, and you know my grandson, he was playing on our patio one day, and he runs over to me and he says, Grandpa, I just saw a little tiger. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, oh, I saw a little tiger. And what he saw was a chipmunk. But all he knew was the stripes, and the only thing he'd ever seen with stripes before was a tiger. So to him, that was a little tiger.
That was a tiger.
And we're going to see the same thing over the years, whether it be reports that happened in 1960 or a report maybe from the 3rd century. People explained it in terms that they understood, in the reality that they understood. So back in the 18th century or in the 19th century, the 1800s, if somebody saw something or they viewed an archaeological artifact, they didn't know anything about spaceships or helicopters or whatever when the Egyptians saw something. So they're not going to say, that was a helicopter. They're going to say, it was a flaming chariot. So we're going to examine that as well. We're going to refine reality in that way. We're also going to redefine the reality of some of the UFO stories you've heard. Some are true, some are not. And some people are not going to like about when I tell them which ones aren't true. And they're going to like some of the ones I tell them that are true. So that's where that's how we're going to be different.
That's right. I mean, in reality, this subject is so broad and vast that it's just beyond belief. I can't get over all these years that we were told by the media and that, if it can't be, it just don't exist. And that's really not the answer.
Well, J. Allen Hynek wrote that in a book that he wrote. He was kind of the father of modern UFOs. He worked for Northwestern University, originally hired by the United States Air Force for Project Blue Book. His job was to debunk all these sightings. In the end, after a while, he said to the Air Force, I can't do this anymore, because some of it just doesn't make sense. And he said, what happens today in the media and in governments, because they can't deal with this, it's basically, it can't be, therefore it isn't. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. When you say this is a broad subject, it is. And I'm not going to in any way say that I know everything about all these areas, okay? But we're going to talk about, when you talk about science, you're talking about physics. You're talking about medicine. You're talking about philosophy, psychology, sociology, theology. It all comes in here at some point, depending on who you are and who's talking about. So that's going to come into it a little bit. And again, I don't know everything about all that stuff. I just know, what we studied and some of the information there. So we're going to be different in that regard. And I think we've all talked before is when we tell you something, or when I tell you something that I think is true, that I saw a classified report, or I heard from these other 5 men classified information, I'm going to try and draw a parallel to you with 21st thinking technology on why this could be true and why this can be real. I mean, we know now through Kepler and Hubble, the space telescopes, we know that a conservative estimate, within our galaxy alone, the Milky Way galaxy, there's a possibility of 40 billion planets, 40 billion, that can harbor life just like us. Now you add to that there's 100 million galaxies out there. Mm-hmm. What is the likelihood that we are the only ones in this vast universe? Probably pretty small. So we're gonna start to talk that way and throw some stuff out there. And I know some people are gonna say, well, what about this? What about that? Yeah, probably some very good questions, and we're gonna try and deal with it. And if we don't know the answer, we're gonna say we don't know. And Steve likes to bring this up. There may be times when you ask me a question, they're gonna say, do you know anything about this? And I'm gonna say yes, and they're gonna say, tell me about it. I'm gonna say no. Because I did work on certain projects, and I will not go into anything that had to do with the work I did directly myself. I will not talk about any of that secret stuff. That's it doesn't apply here.
Well,
No.
excuse me, but you actually had enough information from your credible sources that are unnamed sources.
Well, we can put their names up if we want to, but yeah.
But I mean, when you did your book,
Right.
when you put your book together, those are not real names when you did that.
Well, they're partial names. Yes, Steve, just remember, yes, we put a book together. See, when I think of doing this, I don't think much about the book. We did the book because we wanted people to have information.
It's amazing.
When I met with these 5 men, military and intelligence people, at the top of their organizations, okay, they probably have information about the most closely guarded secret in the history of mankind. They saw a UFO conference, or I got them to visit a UFO conference, and they didn't want to go. One just wanted to go on a road trip, wanted to play golf, But they went to the conference, and they watched, and they were both intrigued and disappointed by what they saw. On one hand, they were intrigued because they said, a few of those speakers are pretty close to being right. And then they said, a few of these others, they're not even close. And I said to them, well, all right, if you don't like it, tell your story. And they said, all right, we will tell our story. And they said, we'll tell our story. We don't care if anybody believes us or not, and you're going to write it. Oh, thank you. So I wrote it. So we wrote a book called The Final Revelation of the Sun Project, and that's pretty much what they told me was true and what they told me wasn't true. And I've made this point to a number of people before, is everybody's had that experience where something bad happens. That's the best way I can describe this. And somebody says something to you, and you get that feeling in the pit of your stomach, that feeling of reality, your stomach comes up. I've been doing this, like I said, for 50 years. So I believe in a lot of stuff, and there's some stuff I don't believe in. But when these men, at their level of rank and position, said certain things to me, I stopped, and I said, wait a minute, you're kidding me. And I said, no, you asked us. We didn't ask you. And if you don't want to listen, like one of them, Phil, he was in charge of naval intelligence, he goes, I don't have time to do this. But I sat there and I said, I can't believe that what they're telling me, stuff that I may have believed, is actually true. And we're going to talk about that. I mean, what do I mean by that? Just a little bit to give you a little information. Roswell, did it happen? Yes, it did happen.
Absolutely.
Not everything is as you've heard. We have and we talked about this in earlier shows, but it did happen, and we learned things from that. And we can draw parallels to today's technology by examining that whole case.
Yeah, the history, I mean, when you think about it, Roswell was the eye-opening experience for most of us, as we know it. But, I mean, there's been other books written, Chariots of the Gods, who really opened the eyes, not only us, I think it opened the eyes of the government too.
Well, and we're going to talk about it. It's interesting because Roswell is a pivotal point. It's Roswell, and of course, that 47 when that was kind of the beginning of the modern era of the UFO.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
When Kenneth Arnold saw UFOs over Mount Washington. But the interesting thing about Roswell is it has ties to the ancient astronaut theory, because when Roswell occurred, right after World War II, the United States government got a lot of information from Germany, confiscated files, plus through Operation Paperclip, we got a lot of information from the Nazis. Now, some people know that Hitler and the Nazis were into the occult, or so they thought they were into the occult, and they were into this whole UFO thing and finding ancient artifacts. And when the U.S. government got a hold of some of this information, they said, they're nuts, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Then Roswell happened. They re-examined the whole story again and started to get very interested in the ancient alien theory. So much so that when von Daniken in '68 wrote his book, the government got concerned that von Daniken may have let the cat out of the bag here. And it's interesting, one of the men looked at me and said to me, if it wasn't that the media kind of derided the book and kind of made him look like he was a little nuts, and the interest kind of passed, steps would have been taken to silence him. And when people say, well, the government doesn't do that, well, the story is in 1952, there were UFO sightings over Washington, D.C., and we're going to talk about that. And when the government decided what to do about that, because they were concerned, and that was a real event, they were concerned. They brought in 2 generals, General John Sanford, Major General John Sanford, and General Roger Ramey. Now, most people aren't going to remember the name Roger Ramey, but Roger Ramey was considered to be the country's top UFO expert. He was also the man who was in charge of the Roswell whole debacle, who said it never happened. Now, how can he be a UFO expert if Roswell didn't happen? But anyway, in their meeting, they spoke to the press and said, we need to get you to help us stop people from making these reports. And there was two reasons. One was they were concerned that the communists may be doing all this stuff, getting them to just jam the lines with reports. And the other concern was there's some real stuff out here that they didn't want people talking about us.
Well, Rick, as usual, when you're having fun, time flies. And we're going to have to kind of call it
We got
a day
about 10
today.
minutes. We got about 10 minutes if you want to,
Oh, we do?
Yes.
Okay.
And one of the things that I really want to ask is you said you've been doing this about 50 years or so. Was there a certain event that happened in your life or something that really all of a sudden pulled you into that world and made you want to, go into the military and learn about this stuff and find out what's real? Was there anything as a boy that started the curiosity?
Well, that was the thing is I went to a movie in Hartford. Do you remember the old theater there in Hartford? I can't remember the name of it. It's still out there. I don't know what it was.
State Street?
Yeah, no, it's right over in the south end of Hartford, right by the church. And I went to a movie there. I was with a friend. I came out and I was waiting for my father to come and pick us up. We went into a little drugstore that was there. Remember when we had drugstores?
Yeah.
We went into a drugstore and they had the magazine rack, and they had a magazine there. I forgot what it was, but it had flying saucers on it. And I started reading that. And I said, wow, this is interesting. I kind of want to see where this goes.
So that's what pulled you in.
Yeah.
Was that also what led you into wanting to go into the military, or did you have no choice?
No, that was what happened with those projects. Is believe it or not, at the time, the military was not doing what we were doing out in the commercial world. They were having problem with intrusion detection in terms of their computers. The group I was working with, we had already taken care of that, and so the Air Force came kinda a calling. There's a whole project involved in this. And they said, we want to know how to do this, and you're the only guys who know how to do it. So,
because you were geeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still are. Mm-hmm. So, I had a friend who had been there for 20 years. This main guy, I'd known him for many years. And Phil goes, listen, come and work with us. And I had an opportunity to leave this company where I was, and I said, okay, I will. Never did I have any idea what we were really getting into. So that's what kind of started that. And then I met them. And then, when you work with cybersecurity, especially doing data authentication, you get to see a lot of data because you have to know if it's real or not. And we have ways of making sure data is real and data isn't real and things like that. So that's kind of where that got started. The interesting thing is, how did I get into computers? I think that's more of an interesting story. I didn't know what to do. I'm going to go to college. What am I going to do? And I said, I like Star Trek. So, they have computers. I'm going to go into computers.
Star Trek. Yeah.
And in reality, when you think about Roswell, some of the things that happened after, when it comes to the technology, was so important when it comes to today's computers.
1978, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There's a line in there where, did Spielberg know? Did Spielberg not know? But he said something about those ships that were flying overhead that were actually true. I don't know how many people picked up the line. We can talk about something. He said about those ships, we're monitoring no biologics at this time. And that's a hint as to what was really in some of those ships. Wow. And he said that in '78. And in the Roswell story, we talk a little bit about what are those gray aliens?
Yeah, the grays, as we call
them. The grays.
Don't worry about it. We'll get to you.
Steve knows the grays, right?
Steve is over here with Marvin, who likes to join us. Marvin had nothing to do tonight, so he came along. Right, Marvin?
Yep.
Yeah, I am so fascinated when we talk about what was found in Roswell, which led to so much technology. Fiber optics. That's a big deal.
We can't always draw a straight line, but we are seeing things that we're going to talk about. The Superman memory crystals, which are real. Or they're going to talk about nuclear-powered diamond batteries, which are real. Which back in '47 or even 1978, when they started talking about Roswell, people said, you can't put data in a crystal. You can't do this. Whoa, well, we can. And we're starting to learn how to do that. So one of the points of this show is, as we start talking about that 21st or even late 20th century technology, is if we can do it, isn't it possible that somebody has done it before us? Isn't it possible, as we reach out to the stars and to Mars and out there, isn't it possible that somebody else has done the same thing and is a little more advanced than we are? Isn't that possible?
And you put it excellent one day where we were talking, and you said, we go to Mars with rovers and probes, in reality, we are aliens in Mars.
Yeah.
Are you telling me we are the only one capable of doing something like this?
Well, and that's it. And then the other thing I think we've talked about, and I don't know if this is a spoiler or not, or some people aren't going to like this, is just settle down for a minute when we talk about extraterrestrials. We are not talking about Hollywood's version of extraterrestrials, because that's not the way it is. Do they exist? Yes. What do they look like? They look a lot like we do. And doesn't that make a certain amount of sense? But we can talk about that and how we know that. And people who follow the UFO, or what I call the ufologists, they know that in terms of extraterrestrials, we have different types. We have the Nordics, we have the reptilians, we have the Greys. Yeah. Well, as far as what we're talking about the Nordics. They're very much like us, because in many ways, we're related to them.
Well, absolutely.
We'll talk about it.
We're going to get into some very interesting things in this show, let me tell you. As time goes by, I mean, I am just fascinated by it. I tell you, there isn't a subject when it has to do with this thing that does not appeal to me, you know?
I think also the thing that I found, like even today, the government, let's say it, knows so much, and they also want to protect us. They don't want us to know too much. I mean, if we ever knew, this could hurt us.
Well,
I mean,
and some people think it's a conspiracy, but remember, if you're a military person, you've taken an oath to protect your country and its citizens from all enemies, foreign and domestic. If they believe that this information that they're withholding is part of national security and protects us, that's not a conspiracy. They're just doing their jobs. And we're just so used to government people not doing their jobs or holding to their oath. That's what these military people are trying to do. So.
Oh, well, of course, we're learning, too, that, you know, as far as E.T. go, we'll leave it at that. E.T.s, they may not be hostile here. This isn't like a myth that they're our enemy. And in reality, we really don't know that.
Right, and it's not, when we talk about this, people seem to think, oh, you know, I'm going to jump on my flying saucer and I'm going to go visit Earth. It doesn't work like that. The information that we've gathered, the stuff I've seen, the classified information I receive is, their stuff is state-sponsored just like our stuff is. Nobody can just say, oh, I'm going to Earth for a visit. I'm going to go there for a vacation. It doesn't work that way. It's programmed. It's planned. There's reasons for what's done. Absolutely. People may not like some of the reasons for why it's done, but we'll talk about that later on.
Well, you know, Rick, I guess time is it's coming up on us. And I want to remind people, if you want more information, to please email us at the View Show at AOL.com, and we'll be glad to talk to you further about it. And in the future, we're going to go to a live show where you will call in and we'll talk to you on the phone while the show is going on. And I believe that this show is going to have more information about UFOs than you ever seen before. And when we're done, your view yourself, you're going to say to yourself, is this real or isn't it? And you will have the answer with yourself. Anything else you want to talk about, Rick?
No, I think that's it. I think pretty much we've set where we're going to go. We've given a few spoilers out there, some stuff we're going to talk about. We've said some things are real. I think the point we want to make is that, yes, we are going to debunk some things. But if you're looking for us to say that UFOs or extraterrestrials don't exist, we're not going to. On the other hand, like Steve said, not every UFO is an ET event.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but it's really unlikely that around Connecticut you're going to see a real UFO at night. It's just not going to happen.
It's even more of a problem now. You have these drones.
Drones.
I mean, it wouldn't be too hard to make something look like a UFO, let me tell you. Well, I want to thank everybody for watching tonight, and please tune in again next week as we get back to the UFO answers as far as do they exist or not, and why we are investigating them. Thank you.